Hey everyone, it's Justine and welcome back to Distress Inks 101. This is the last day of class, so I'm just kind of mixing everything we learned this week all together. I have two videos to show you today. This video here is going to feature this sympathy card, which I think is really pretty, and then I'm doing another video where you're going to make actually 4 different cards, quick and easy and simple using Distress Inks and watercolor. To get started, I'm going to be using my Misty because I need a really fantastic impression with this stamp. I'm using VersaFine ink, and I'm inking up the Rose Terrace stamp from the Ton Stamps. Now, because this is such a solid stamp, there's so many solid areas, the chances of it stamping extremely sharp and black are not that great. So I want to stamp it over and over again in the same spot. So you can see that it stamped really well the first time, but I want to get that black really deep and really dark. So I'm going to stamp this actually, I believe 3 times I ended up stamping it to get a really great impression. You need to give this a couple of seconds to dry as well, or your Distress inks are going to smudge the black ink. Now to blend this background, I'm going to be using 4 different colors of an orange family. I'm going to be using Ripe Persimmon, I'm using Carved Pumpkin, Spiced Marmalade, and Dried Marigold, or sorry, not Dried Marigold, Wild Honey. And I am going to ink these all into the background. So I'm starting off the cardstock, working my way in a circular motion, nice and slow and no pressure on your hand. That's how you get a perfect blend every time. It does take practice. I've been doing this for quite a long time, but I definitely say following those steps and making sure you're not putting any pressure on your hand and just taking the patience to build up the color will make all the difference in your blending. It's not going to happen in a couple of seconds. I have you right now on like 4 times the speed I'm actually doing it, so it does take some time. So I'm just going all around the edges and working my way towards the middle, going from sort of a dark on the edges to a light in the middle. I do believe that some of the black ink is actually coming off with the orange, but I do like the way that that's blending and making it darker. And that's why I'm using a paper towel to hold it so I can avoid inky fingers and getting black ink on my hands. Because VersaFine ink is a pigment ink, it does take a couple of minutes to dry, and that's why that's happening. So I think this color here is an absolutely perfect color for a sympathy card. It could also be used for any sort of other card, but I just like the elegance of the background as well as the stamp. I think it's perfect to go with one of those sentiments. So I'm just finishing up the blending and just adding a dark color around the edges. And I am going to attach this to my card base. My card base measures 11 by 4 1/4, and I just fold it in half at 5.5 inches to make a top folding card. And I'm going to attach this panel here onto my base using some Tombow monoliquid adhesive. I want to make sure that it's sticking down hard, so I press down with my full hand and just stay there for a couple of seconds, and then it should be stuck on there very well. Now to create my sentiment and the actual focal point of my card, I'm going to grab a scrap piece of black cardstock, go over it with an embossing bag, and I'm going to stamp my sentiment in Versamark ink and heat emboss it using white embossing powder. A lot of people ask me why I don't just stamp in white ink. White ink is great, it's pigment, it will show up on black cardstock, but it won't be as sharp or nearly as sharp as embossing. And also I find it takes forever to dry, you have to heat it anyway, so why not just do embossing and get a perfect impression every time. So I'm just going to heat that up here and just cut down my sentiment. So it just says thinking of you during this difficult time, and the sentiment comes from Altenew, the Thinking of You stamp set I believe it is. I'm going to make a mark using my white gel pen because I'm going to cut this down into a little fishtail banner. So I'm just going from the corner to the white mark, and you should get a perfect banner each time without having to use a die. And if not, just practice on a scrap piece of paper to make sure that you do it right. The first couple times I did it never really turned out well for me. So I'm just going to grab some 3D foam tape and attach my sentiment onto the card. I didn't need a lot of embellishment or a big sentiment on this card because I think the background just speaks a million words. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I didn't want to distract from the background in any way, so I thought a nice black and white sentiment would do the trick. I'm just going to stick that on the edge there straight against the card base, and that's the end of today's card tutorial. So I hope you enjoyed today's card tutorial and you enjoyed the last day of class. Don't forget to check out the other video because it's really helpful as well. All the supplies used are linked to below in the video description or on my blog. On my blog there's actually photos of the supplies so you can see them, and you can access that here by clicking on click here. Over on the right, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel clicking on the subscribe button, or you can click on the photo there to see yesterday's class where we did some other blending techniques with stencils and things. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.